the marketing, recruitment, and admissions team for the MBA office. And also, we have two extremely special guests, Tim Buckland and Shannon Hagan. So Tim is a current full-time student, and Shannon is a current part-time student. So how the session is going to work is Charlene and Chris are going to start with giving you a brief presentation on the admissions process. And then we'll bring Shannon and Tim back up, and you'll get a chance to ask any questions that you have. So this is a great opportunity for you to pick Tim and Shannon's brain on any questions that you have about the process. So with that said, I'll pass it over to Chris and Charlene.
Save any really hard questions for Amy. I think it's over to you.
So good morning, everybody. I think what we want to talk about first is just to go over our ideal profile of an MBA student. So there's really kind of three main components that we're looking at. First, of course, is ensuring that the applicant meets all of our standard formal admissions criteria. So has a minimum of 2 years of work experience, an undergraduate degree, a minimum GPA of 3.0, completed the GMAT, so on and so forth. I'll be getting into more of those components on the next slide. The second one is related to a diverse student body. So what we mean by that, we don't mean that you necessarily need to have diverse experience, but we want our student body to be reflective of, be more diverse, I suppose. So what we mean by that is culturally. So we want to have various cultures represented in the program. We also want to have admit people with varying functional and technical backgrounds. So I know we don't necessarily, one of the common questions that we get asked is like, will I be in a room full of engineers, for example? So we say no, actually. They might represent 25-30% of our student body, but we want to make sure that we have a good representation across the board of both technical functional backgrounds in addition to industries. And of course, we want to have a good gender mix in the program as well. So that's really important to us. And I think because we accept people in the program on a rolling basis, this gets more and more important as we get to the point closer to the end of our deadline. And the admissions committee will be looking back at the past profile and who we did thus far. Just want to make sure that you might have to adjust your strategy or adjust things a little bit so that we can have the diversity. And of course, there's personal stability characteristics and behavioral competencies that we think students need to be successful in the program and in the work world as well. And so we worked with our careers team to identify 4 main personal stability characteristics and behaviors. And so what we're looking for, we want to have people who want to drive coming into the program, people who are adaptable. For many people, they're kind of returning back to school after many years away, so we want to have people that can really adapt back to the requirements at hand. People that are accountable and have ownership, and the last one is a positive attitude. So we really want to have a positive culture in the MBA program. So these are all really important things that we're looking at, and we'll look at all of these things throughout the entire application. So, but we can't kind of your references say what you do in these regards, and what do you talk about in the statement of intent in terms of your values. We'll also have some interview questions around these areas as well. Okay, so I'm just going to talk a little bit next about some of our main points for our admissions criteria. So one of the common questions we get is there a weighting for each aspect of the application? There isn't really specific weighting to each. We really take your entire application into consideration altogether, and it just helps us inform an overall impression of you. So for GPA and GMAT scores, they're pretty standard. We typically look at these in conjunction with one another, and this lets us know kind of academically will you be successful in the program. We want to make sure that we're admitting people who will do well and be successful in the program. So we look for students who have a minimum GPA of about 3.0. The average that we receive fair year over year is typically around 3.4. And in terms of GMAT, we look for a score of a minimum of 550. The average we receive, again, changes year over year, but is around 630 or 640, just to put that into perspective. Your resume and work experience. So really what we're looking at when we're looking at your resume, we want to see the nature of your work experience and what kind of progression or career evolution have you experienced in your career. So we look for, again, a minimum of 2 years of experience. And that really is a minimum. We think kind of coming to the a program with years of experience is so important so that you can kind of put into perspective the academic theoretical concepts that are applied in class and relate it back to the experience you've gained. So not only do you take a lot more, but you can understand what the professors are talking about and kind of going through. Yeah, for work experience, I think it's important to know there's not one industry or one type of work that's we deem more important to than another. So it's not better for you necessarily to have investment banking experience versus experience working in a not-for-profit organization. So everything is good. We just again want to see what is your responsibility, what are you accountable for, so on and so forth. And yeah, I think the length of your work experience isn't necessarily as important as again the quality. The only exception this would be is if you have a lower GPA. Sometimes having more years of work experience can work in your favor because it's showing that you progress in your career and you've experienced other life achievements that aren't necessarily indicative of your GPA. In terms of the statement of intent, this is a really important aspect of your application. This helps identify to us for applications that we get with people who might have similar GPAs and GMAT scores and similar work experience. This helps really make you stand out and lets us get to know about you more as an individual. So, there's a few components that we're really looking here for you to include. We really want you to talk about, why do you want to be MBA and how will it support you in your career goals? What are your career goals, both in the short term and the long term? And why is now the right time for you to complete the MBA program? We also want to hear why the University of Alberta MBA program specifically. How does this program kind of differ compared to others you might be looking at, and what makes it unique in terms of being able to meet your needs going forward? Yeah, and then for references, let's go to the next one. For references, this is probably kind of hard to see, but some of you might have seen this on our site. This is a reference letter that we send off to your 3 references. So you supply us with the names and the professional email addresses of your references. We forward this off to them. It's not necessarily important. What is most important here is that your references really care and will provide some effort in completing the application. We want you to send us people who can really speak about your abilities and your skills. And we want some kind of depth of information in these references. We prefer, of course, supervisors, previous or current, but you can also use clients, and so on and so forth. Oh, and just another point about the reference letters is that we're often waiting for, often what we hear from applicants is that you'll have completed all your part of the application process, and you're like, oh, it's taking so long. But what we find is that we're often waiting for the references to be done. So you can always begin your application at any point and kind of allow them, give your references kind of time to complete your references, just so that you're not waiting on that at the end.
And you can also check if they've been received through the online system itself, so it tells you if there's no from home.
Okay, great. And the last one is just a video, I guess the interview process. So we have a two-step for our interview. So first is a video interview. This is where you complete, you record 3 verbal questions and 1 written question. You have quite a limited time to complete these, and you aren't able to review them. So it's really just try once and that's it. It's okay if they're not perfect. It's really, we just want to be able to listen to your communication abilities and how you think on your feet. Similar to any other interview. And of course, there's then an in-person or Skype interview after that point. So those are all the next steps. And again, we just recommend that you prepare for those interviews as you would any other job interview. Have just examples that you prepared, be able to speak about your skill set, and also most importantly, be able to speak about why you want the MBA, why you debate, so on and so forth.
That's over to me now, isn't it? All right. So thought I'd just run through sort of what kind of our application kind of steps or our process looks like in and of itself. So the first thing Shar mentioned was we look for kind of qualified candidates, so academically and professionally. So if anybody wants to know for sure if there's somebody that we consider, we have something that we call preliminary assessment. So it's available through our website. There are links are in a number of places, but the easiest way is to go to our homepage of mba.net and we'll just right there to do it. Essentially what we would be looking at here as we go through your resume, if you have a copy of your transcripts and can upload those, we'll go through those as well. Just make sure that academically you're where you need to be for our program, make sure your work experience is sort of in line with what we're looking for, and we'll kind of let you know where to stand and you can go from there as to whether or not you choose to finish the application. With the application itself, so once it's been submitted and we have everything that's part of the application, our admissions committee, we do sort of initial kind of check or review of your application, just make sure it's sort of in line with what we're looking for, and then move on to sort of the interview stage. So Charlene mentioned both the interview stages. Essentially first the video interview, then a more detailed sort of in-person interview. After the interview stage, our admission committee would then kind of get back together as a whole, we sit down, go over sort of all aspects of your application, and decide whether or not to sort of go forward with making an offer. Send out an offer of admission. When you see that, you have kind of roughly 3 or 4 weeks to kind of decide whether or not to move forward. And then, assuming you accept, we will see you back here in August for an interview. Very straightforward. One slide, that's all. So one sort of common question that we get is just sort of what does a typical kind of profile look like in the class. So I've got kind of 3 slides. This is for our full-time, then our part-time, and our fast track program. Just to give you sort of a rough guide of who's in the class, sort of where they're coming from, what type of experience that they have. I don't really want to talk about the slides that are up there, so I'll let you sort of look very quickly. And I will say, as Char mentioned, we do try and get fairly diverse student body. So we will look for as many different sort of industries that can be represented as possible. We don't value any one type of experience more than another. Yeah. So this is more of our part-time class now. So probably a little older than our full-time class coming in, have a bit more work experience and perhaps sort of less important overall sort of GMAT because we put more weight towards the work experience. And then with our sort of fast track class, so for our business graduates, we don't list the GMAT because a number of our students coming into this program are business graduates here from the School of Business, and we wouldn't ask them to submit a GMAT with their application. But otherwise, you can see it's sort of falls somewhere in between our full-time and our part-time class profile, and that's likely because it's a combination of full-time and part-time students that are pretty consistent. So one other thing I'll just kind of cover quickly, again, it's a common question that we get, is in terms of kind of scholarships or financial support that's available. We do have kind of a fair bit of support. Will vary by which program you're applying to, so perhaps unsurprisingly, we have more kind of financial support and scholarships available to our full-time students than we would towards our part-time students coming in. Something, of course, that our part-time students are working full-time, making less of a dramatic cut, I guess, in income program. With our entrance awards, so these are something that we would automatically consider anybody that's been admitted to the program for, so there's no need to do a separate application or even indicate an interest. We'll be looking at similar sort of things that we look for just admissions in general, so we would look at your academic background, GMAT score, and also your work experience as well. These can range sort of anywhere from $1,000 up to about $10,000 that we offer in terms of entrance awards. And then we have a large number of scholarships that are kind of offered or given out during the program itself. There are many different criteria that go into these, so some are based more on academic performance in the program. There's others that are driven entirely by kind of your non-academic into the program, so involvement in youth groups or leadership if you can. Some that are specific to part-time students, some that are specific to full-time students, some that are specific to different specializations as well. Again, these can range with dramatic mean values. So there's a few that are worth probably $11,000 or $12,000, some that are worth $1,000 or $2,000. And we have a full list of all of them on our website, but probably have $300,000, $400,000 a year that we give out in kind of donor scholarships for the program. So lots of opportunity out there, and reward people both academically and involved in class as well. And then deadlines, that's something else I'll talk about. So for our MBA program, so that's full-time, part-time, or fast-track, we have a deadline of June 1st for you to submit your online application. When you submit it, so we would ask you to include your references. They don't necessarily have to be received by June 1st, but you would have to enter kind of their contact details, so they would be kind of receiving a request for a reference, but we can accept them coming in later. So it's okay if they come in a couple of weeks after our official deadline. The other thing I'll mention just in terms of deadlines would be the GMAT or the GRE, both. But when you were to go write the exam, you would get an unofficial score report essentially after you're done, which would cover 3 of the 4 sections of the exam, and there'd be a 4th section, analytical writing, that takes probably 1 to 2 weeks to be kind of graded to get an official score report. So by June 1st, we ask that you have written the GMAT and have an unofficial score, and include that with your application, and then we could receive the official one after our deadline as well. So we'd be okay with that. And if anybody is interested in our executive MBA program, deadline for that is June 30th, so we'll get there.
All right, so thank you, Chris and Charlene. I think that's great. Everyone, I'm sure, has lots of questions. But to start things off, maybe Tim and Shannon can kind of come a little more in the center here. So before we just open up to the group, I was wondering if you could maybe tell us a little bit more about your experience with the GMAT, and if you have any sort of tips or whatever you kind of want to say about that.
Yeah, so my experience, it's a lot of fun. I think you guys, I don't think it's not fun. It's terrible for every process. But the way I learned very much through books. So I ended up buying one of the, I think it's Kaplan Study Guide. I went through that book probably 5 times before I ended up writing it. Very useful. I know we have classes here that help with that too. In my mind, there's no way of being over-prepared for the GMAT. You go in and write it, and it's a different experience. That's all I'm going to say. So for me, yeah, I still feel like I could have been more prepared for it, and I studied a lot. It is a good experience. It teaches you a lot about kind of how your brain works and what's important. I'm a scientist by training, and the analytical, like the actual math part was the hardest for me, which I found ridiculous, but that's just how it was. So yeah, that was my experience with it.
Yeah, so I guess I kind of have like a similar experience. I'm an engineer by trade, so I'm one of the anomalies you probably don't want to be within the program. Anyways, so I did the GMAT. It was stressful for me. I'm not a very good test taker. I don't really enjoy taking tests, and so the fact that you have to go through and you can't go back was really stressful. But obviously, I made it through, and I also I got the study materials from the GMAT website, and going through those is really helpful. I guess just practice really helps you go through. I think that's all that you can really do to go through it. It's just practice makes perfect, right? And I guess if you don't do well the first time, you can always do it again. But like I said, it may be a 550, but if you get a little bit lower, I'm sure it's not the end of the road, right? So you can always still apply and see what happens.
Yeah. And how many hours do you think you dedicate to studying?
I would say, so I did a lot of that at work, which is not very good. I would say probably 40, 50 hours, somewhere in that range. A lot of that's doing the actual exam. So as part of those books or as part of those kits, you actually are able to do the GMAT. Very, very useful, especially if it's time crunched.
So I guess like mine would be roughly the same. I was working at the same, like I was working full time at the time, so I would just study on weekends or in evenings, and I have a pretty busy social life, so I would try and fit it in with that. And so, anyways, yeah, around maybe a little bit less, but yeah, quite a few hours you have to put in to be able to do it, because it's refreshing all the stuff you learn in high school, right? Like it's very, well, I don't want to say basic math, like it's still hard, but it's a lot of stuff that you learned in high school, and you kind of forget that, especially even when you've done engineering, right? So yeah.
You mean you don't do trigonometry?
Yeah.
Probably.
Exactly, and stuff like you know like the higher level stuff in engineering, then all of a sudden you have to learn how to do like 2 + 2 again. Like, what? Not calculus?
Okay, that's great. So you had a whole presentation about the whole admissions process. I know we were just focusing on the GMAT here. So does anyone have any questions for our panel?
What about GMAT versus GRE?
So we will view them pretty much the same. So we don't give preference to one or the other. I'm not sure what the GRE sort of writing times or availability is like. I imagine it's pretty similar, but I know with GMAT they have their week every year, and I'm not sure if they're booked or not, but they should have exam times pretty much every day.
Yeah, it seems like GMAT is the more popular option.
But we will treat them equally.
Yep.
I just have actually a question about the program. So from what I was reading, a lot of schools would have older and more experienced candidates. And I noticed that your age and minimum requirement is 2 years experience, an average of 28 years. And I guess, excuse my ignorance, but I guess it was of my understanding that you're really relying on people's experience to come and enrich the collaborative group of students. And I'm just wondering if 28 years average really offers that much experience. Tell me.
Well, that, but sort of your experience in like.
So I'm a little bit on the heavy side of that. So I'm 30, but I ended up I have a master's degree in science, and I have 3 years of non-profit experience. Comparing that to other people in the program, like 2 years is, I don't know anybody that, other than some of the fast tracks, obviously they're coming quite quickly through school. I would say the majority of us have a lot more experience than that. And I would say with 28 years, a lot of us have very specific experience in the industries that we're in. So like engineering and government, like we bring a lot of experience in our backgrounds. So, and the other thing is because we're 20, 30 years old, we haven't switched a lot. So a lot of us have 4 or 5 years in one year. So it's, I would say it's almost better than somebody that's switched a bunch of times going through that process.
And I'd also say like, we do have different kind of average ages across the programs, and typically sort of what we see with our full-time programs is that the majority of students are looking to make kind of change, a fairly substantial change in terms of direction or focus. Whereas with our part-time program or our sections, people are looking to just sort of stay within the industry or the area that they're in and kind of move up to more senior level roles. And I think that also plays a part of it too, right? If you are considering if you want to make a fairly dramatic shift, you probably want to do that sooner rather than later as well. Gives you more time to kind of grow in that area.
So you rely more on coursework and more on the collaboration side, or how do you, just from talking to other people, it sounds like a lot of opportunity to learn from other people in university, but because of their experience. So would you say that the UA program relies very heavily on the teaching staff and the coursework more so, or how would you rate that?
I wouldn't say about that, because I'm in part-time, and so I'm 32, so I'm above, I guess, the average age. But there's a lot of people in the program who are like 24, 25, and I think no matter your age, you bring different experiences and different life lessons. So I think regardless of the age that you have, like I think you're always bringing something to the program, and you're always learning something from everyone, right? So I have 2 degrees. I did a science degree, and then I worked in the consulting industry, and then I went back into engineering, and then I worked for government, and so now I'm doing my MBA part-time. So I have different experiences to bring than maybe somebody who's 24 and they've been working. They just started working, right? They may not have done too much work, but yeah, that's just my experience. Anyways, like it doesn't matter. Like there's just no matter your age, I think you can bring something to the program regardless,
And I
right?
think further to that, like one of the things we hear the most from students who complete the program or going through the program, what they're getting, often most of it is not necessarily the lectures or the classes, it's the other aspects and what the other students bring to the table and kind of the culture of the program. It's a really incredible experience in your life to do this. And I think for many people, whatever our age average is, probably reflective of the fact that if you're entering into the full-time program, you're sacrificing a lot, a big opportunity cost of leaving work and going back to school full-time. And for many people, they're thinking about family and, when will I start a family or when will I do X, Y, Z? And so, you
for me to be able to dedicate the time to complete this program. So there's kind of a lot of factors behind the scenes that are at play.
Yeah, well, and the school is a big part of it, but there's also the huge social side of the MBA program. Like you could probably be doing something every night with the MBA. Like there's different kind of social groups, there's all this kind of stuff. So if you really want to like get into the MBA, you can meet so many different people. Like I probably met like 50 or 60 different people, and everybody's got like a different background. There's international students, there's non-international students, there's people from Alberta, people from BC, right? Like it's all over. Obviously other provinces as well, but yeah.
I'd say we're probably very similar, if not even a little higher in terms of average work experience than a lot of our peer programs across the country.
So it sounds like there's like a big emphasis on like relationships and like who you're looking for to like make up your intake for your program, which is cool because networking is the way the world works and that's how business works. But I get the sense too, because of that, is there a lot of like group work involved with courses and working together with others on group projects? Like, is that like majority of the course content that makes up this program? Like, what's the ratio like for that?
So the short answer is there is, like there's typically a large portion of group work, but it varies by class. So some courses or some subject areas we have, there will be a lot less group work. So something like finance or accounting where there's more technical knowledge we want to make sure students have, there might be less group work. And then in courses like marketing or a lot of our strategy focused courses will probably be a fair bit more group work. But maybe I have the best, I mean, I talk about generally what I know, but it's been 6 years since I graduated from the program. So maybe Tim or Shannon kind of fit.
So absolutely, group work is a big part. Even in accounting, we do case projects where it's a group. So you have a group of 4 or 5 people putting together an accounting case for whichever company you get. As you go on to your second year, it's pretty much all group work. And to tell you the truth, that's probably the most interesting and best learning is actually working in those groups because everybody comes from a different background and you all think differently, which is interesting. Especially in the first, I come from science, we don't do group work, I don't talk to other people, I just do my research and I go home. So being in that element is really kind of fun. Yeah, you learn a lot about people and yourself. So.
I personally haven't done too much group work. I've taken all the accounting and kind of classes first, so I'm doing all the math stuff. So I'm an engineer, so I just thought I'd ease into it. It's stuff that I know, but I know that there is lots of like group work. I know marketing, they have that little saber where it's a little game that they all play, and they have like a little group competition that they're competing against each other. So there is a lot of group work. I see people doing presentations and stuff all the time and getting together with their group. So you meet lots of interesting people too, right? You have to work with a lot of different personalities. So make it through. It's kind of like any other group project, right?
And group presentations are something different. Like presenting something by yourself is relatively straightforward. When you do it as a group of 4 or 5 people in a very short amount of time, that's a learning experience. Because yeah, wow, things different. So.
You may some of you have to practice.
Absolutely.
To have like a 4-person presentation to make it look good.
Yeah.
Anyway,
How about you? What has your experience been?
so I'm in this semester and then I have 2 classes left in spring, so I'm almost done. So for me, I also felt the same. It was a lot of group work. So same thing as Shannon, when you're doing your first core courses, it's a lot less. And but the group work has been interesting at times, but also the most beneficial because even if you clash with people, which can happen, right? You can still take a learning experience away from that. So I know for me, I felt like I've grown quite a bit in my ability to work with other people and interact. So that's been probably one of the most positive things that I got out of the program.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just have a question about the specializations and if any of the current students are in a specialized program, how you landed on the one you chose.
I'm in public policy management. The rationale for that is I wanted to get into government work. So it seemed like a pretty straight fit for me. Lots of people start out in a specialization and sometimes they'll leave just because there will be a strong emphasis on something they don't like. And the courses in full time is long enough you can actually do that. You can pick something and switch specializations and kind of figure out what you actually want. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I'd just say probably just over half of our students kind of across the board are not doing the specializations. They're kind of following our general route, which gives you sort of the flexibility to pick and choose whichever courses you want. I know we have students that are kind of really interested in maybe 2 areas, and they will, if they don't take one of those specializations and supplement it with courses from the other, they'll more do general and just kind of take kind of half and half from each. So I mean, it really depends, but I will say you're never locked into anything. But if you decide with one course left, if you want to do a different specialization, you may be doing a lot of extra courses that you didn't plan. Yeah, go ahead.
I'm just curious for people who are in the program now, what it was that made you choose U of A. Like I have my specific reasons for being interested, but I'm curious to hear what made you pick this school.
Yeah, well, it's okay. So there's a number of reasons why I picked the school. One, I'm from here. It was convenient for me. It's not the real reason, but that's what I tell a lot of people because it's easier than saying it's really highly ranked. I don't want to sound pompous, right? And it is a really good program in the sense of the group work. So that was one of the reasons I got into it. Yeah, so those are the 2 main for me.
I guess the main reason for me is I live here, right, and I've done 2 degrees, so why not go for a 3rd? And all my friends are here, like I have lots of friends in Edmonton, I have a house, so it's just kind of like, it's just the obvious step for me to go to U of A. And I've enjoyed the degrees that I've done from the U in the past. I really enjoy the U of A, I like the culture and stuff here, so I was willing to come and do a 3rd time the charm here, so.
But I would say, hold that question, and we have a number of our ambassadors are like international students that had, I've told your sample size of like hundreds of schools that they might consider. So I think it's very interesting to hear from them sort of why Alberta made them look at.
When we were looking at value, so I've done quite a few case competitions across the country. And when we talk to places like Robin's a very, very, very expensive school. It's also ranked very highly, but for value what you get, I believe U of A is better than Robin and any of those other schools on Ontario. It's my personal feeling.
I've heard the similar thing, like not necessarily Rotman. I've just heard that other schools aren't as social and they're kind of more focused on like you're getting your degree and it's the grades that you're supposed to get as opposed to like the experience. And so I think U of A, so far for me, it's like the experience as well as the education. So.
Any other questions? Okay, let's see, I have some written down, so. Did you guys make any mistakes in your application? Like, did anything kind of trip you up that you had to go back and you're like, oops, I should have done that differently or anything like that?
I think with the references, it's kind of an interesting process in picking who you want to actually represent you. Always pick people that are going to speak highly of you. Like, that sounds really like stupid to say out loud, but when I was managing, when you see people send references in, half the time they'd be like, well, I didn't really know this person all that well, or they didn't really do that well. It's like, why are you getting that person to represent you? So with me, I took an awful long time picking my references and making sure those people were going to be beneficial for me in the long run.
Yes, I've seen some very, very interesting argument letters over the years. Like, I've seen some where they said, you should not have been this person. I mean, that's probably a bad sign. I mean, it's definitely a bad sign of an application, but probably not a good person to pick right for it. I guess probably have very little emotional intelligence not to recognize someone's really not going to have it. I've had others where you can clearly see that they barely know this person and they have like one-line responses, like they worked with them for this long and they seemed okay. And I didn't supervise them, but I've heard nothing back. And it's like 2 seconds to read, it's like, well, nothing really out of that. And again, it's like, what sort of judgment does that person have to like pick somebody like that as a reference? So I would just say, don't focus so much on like the title or rank of somebody giving a reference, but really focus on people that know you well. That's more beneficial to us than the CEO of the company wrote a reference, but that absolutely nothing.
Can I say something about the reference letter?
No, don't worry.
I'm just going to make a correction that Chris said in regards to the deadline and to submitting the reference letters. So it may not seem like a big deal to you, but it's to me because I'm the one that processes all your applications. So the application deadline is June 1st. So it gets cut off on June 1st. So your references technically need to upload your reference letters to your online application by June 1st. If it goes past the deadline, they'll actually get an error message because the application is closed. So I know Chris said we will accept them a week or two after, and we will, but then they would have to just email it to us directly because they won't be able to do it on the online system.
And that's what I have to hear.
Is there any other questions related to the application process that you guys have?
Do you guys start looking at the application that's submitted before the reference letters come in, or are you waiting for everything
We
at once?
generally wait to have everything together before we move forward. And start taking them, yeah.
But you start interviews ahead of time, or you just don't make decisions about it?
No, we would essentially not even look at it until we start interviewing until we have kind of everything for an application.
I wanted to ask specifically what types of references did you folks get for your application?
So I had my sort of primary investigator when I was working in the lab as a master's student. I had my direct manager and I had the VP that worked above them for my references. I was really tossing the VP and I volunteered, so I was considering using the volunteer manager as well. I tell you the truth, if I could go back, I'd probably use that person for the exact reason that Chris is saying. VP didn't know me that well. Volunteer manager knew me quite well. So yeah.
So more of a character reference.
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah, mine are basically just previous and current managers, and one was a client at the time. Yeah, so just because I worked for CNRL, so it was one of the consultants that we had. And the other ones, yeah, just managers. When I was working with government, it's my government manager, and then a manager at kind of the consultant firms that I had.
As far as the reference letters are concerned, are they upload? Do we provide a link for the reference people to send the references to?
So all you would need to do is, just in the application, include their email address, and then through the system they would get a notification that there's been a request for a reference letter. There's a link to our template. They can choose to upload a different reference letter if they already have one prepared as well. But our preference would be for kind of the standard template that we have, just because it's got some key questions that we'd like to see. But you would need to send it to them. They would essentially just get notification through the system.
Okay.
They haven't received it in how many hours? Are you concerned that it wasn't entered correctly?
I would assume they should get it almost immediately. Kind of once you hit save on that application, it should pretty much go out.
And you can start your application at any time. So you can begin kind of, you have your reference, or sorry, you have your resume, upload that. You can, whatever you have done, you can kind of get a look and begin and you can submit, or it will be considered complete.
How many applicants do you guys get a year, and how many applicants do you accept into an intake?
Sure. Each program is obviously a bit different. So for our full-time program, we probably get 400 to 500 applications a year, and we will probably admit about 100 students to get to a class of about 80. I say about, sort of locked in either way, so if it's higher or lower, that's okay. With our part-time program, we probably get around 150 applications a year. We'll probably admit about 70 students to get to a class of around 60, 65. And then with our fast-track program, we'll probably get 80 or 90 applications to get to a class, and then about 40 students to get to a class of about 30, 35 students.
Any last questions? Your last opportunity to ask these guys? No, I'm just kidding. They'll be around. Okay, so I'd like to thank everybody that came. So Chris, Tim, Shannon, and Shar. I think it was really great. And obviously, if you guys have any questions about anything, you can always contact us at any time about the application process. So what's up next for you is, so you'll have a little bit of time to just go to the bathroom, you can go to the bathroom or whatever, and if you want to stay in this room, there'll be the full-time panel. So that's if you're interested in applying to the full-time program. And if you're interested in the part-time program, that will just be across in room 1-09. Okay? So let's just say thank you to these guys.